Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me, and what a privilege and honor to see so many of you here. This is fantastic. Tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about what compassion is, and then we're going to be doing one or two little exercises. So the first half an hour or so, I'll take you through some ideas about compassion, and of course why we need compassion. But before I do, I want to tell you a little story that you've got to be very careful with compassion. And the story goes like this. There was a lady who was slightly overweight and rushing around at work and slipped on the stairs and knocked her head and had a concussion. And while she was having her concussion, she had a vision that she went to heaven. And while she was in heaven, she saw God. And she said to God, "So that's it then, I'm finished." He said, "No, you just had a concussion, but you do need to look after yourself. You need to nurture yourself, be compassionate to yourself, treat yourself well. And if you do, you've got 40 years. So she thought, that's fantastic. So she came around from the concussion. She thought, right. She went on a diet. She went to the gym. She treated herself with compassion. She did compassionate meditations. She was looking fantastic. She went and had a little bit of plastic surgery for the last little bit, came out of the hospital, and sadly was knocked over by the bus. Whereupon she went to heaven and saw God. She said, "God, you told me I had 40 years. And he looked at her and said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't recognize you." All right, here we go. So the key thing is then why do we need compassion? And there's a big movement now around the world to try to introduce more compassion into a whole range of things, into business, into the way in which we teach our children, into law, into economics, because I think all of us agree that actually over the last 30 years we've become much more competitive, much more materialistic, we're destroying our environment and so on. So this is, although I'm going to be talking about compassion in terms of our own personal psychology, I also want to advise that we're beginning to think about the need for compassion in many, many areas of life. So the first thing is to think about, so why do we need compassion, and why is compassion hard? Because it is. And one of the reasons is because your brain and your mind was built for you. You didn't build it, it was built for you. It was built by your genes, and those genes have been passed on from generation to generation. And your mind has been built to have all kinds of emotions and motivations built into it. So the first thing is recognizing what kind of mind we have. The second issue is the recognition that all of us are born and we live for a short time, about 25,000 days, it's not very long, and then we decay and pass away. No one avoids this. No one avoids the potential risk of getting ill, getting diseased, and so forth. And as we recognize these things, we realize that only if we pull together and help each other can we actually deal with some of the tragedies of life. I'm standing before you now, I can see, but 2 years ago I had a particular form of cataracts, and I would be blind now had it not been for the hard work of a doctor 50 years ago who discovered how to operate on cataracts. We have cured the world of smallpox because of the efforts that we put in to do that. So once we decide to address suffering, we can do that. The third reality is that we are all socially shaped. And the way in which we talk to our patients about this is, imagine that as a 3-day-old baby, I was kidnapped and brought up by a violent drug gang. The lord of the drug gang wanted a baby, and so they kidnapped me. So what would I be like today? Would I be this? Would I be a professor of psychology? Well, the answer is obviously no. I'm much more likely to be violent, possibly criminal, possibly in jail, possibly even dead. So the point is that this version that you see before you is only one version of Paul. I often wish I'd been the other version, the guitar player, because he makes a lot more money. But so all of us are only one versions of ourselves. And many of us, we don't really have any idea about the kind of version that might have emerged had we been brought up in a different environment. And so this begins an understanding that all of us really need to understand the fact that we are socially created. And so when we see people who come from environments that are perhaps less privileged than our own, we can begin to think about, well, had I been brought up in that environment, that might be me. So the key thing is recognizing right from the beginning that much of what goes on in our minds, even our sense of ourselves, is not really our fault, because we didn't choose the brains that we have, and we certainly didn't choose the backgrounds from which we came. We are all, in some sense, created. And so this is important, because it allows us then to begin to think about the challenges that all of us, all humanity face, given that this is the kind of mind, this is the kind of brains we have. So here we are then, we are on a branch of life, we call it the flow of life, and we're up here somewhere. We are part of life, and our brains and our bodies have been evolving over many, many millions of years. And this has caused us to have all kinds of fantastic abilities for language and science and so forth, but it also causes us a lot of trouble. The way that our brains have evolved is riddled with problems. So our brains have within them the same kinds of desires and motivations that many animals do, that we share with our family pets. Like them, we're interested in looking after our offspring. Like them, we can be territorial, we can fight over status, we're interested in sex. Like them, we respond to affection. Your family dog will respond to affection, and humans certainly do. So many of our basic emotions and motivational systems are very old design. But we also have a new brain, because about 2 million years ago, the primate that was about to turn into Homo sapiens started to get clever. And they got clever by evolving capacities for imagining, for thinking, for using symbols, for planning, and so on. This is a wonderful ability, except for the fact that it can also drive you crazy. Imagine a zebra running away from a lion, and eventually the zebra gets away. Within a very short period of time, they realize the lion has wandered off. The zebra will go back to grazing. It can calm down quite quickly. But this is not what happens to humans, because humans can think, humans can imagine, humans hold things in mind. And so for a human, they start to imagine, oh my God, can you imagine what would have happened if I got caught? You know? I can just see myself being eaten alive. They wake up in the middle of the night. Oh my God, what happens tomorrow if I don't see the lion? And the children, oh my God. So humans, sadly, can get caught up in loops where their thinking and their feelings stimulate each other. Not only this, but the kinds of thoughts and imaginations that you create in your head influence how your body works. So most of you will be familiar that if you lay in bed and have very erotic fantasies, you will do things in your body. Now, I'm not going to go into that too much because this is a community-based discussion, but the point is that the image is capable of stimulating a very specific area of your brain called your pituitary, and in that pituitary, a very specific area, a set of cells, which will produce a cascade of hormones in your body. Okay? So that's what you experience in arousal. You experience this cascade of hormones. The point is, you have generated that. You have probed into your brain with your images, with your thinking. And it's true for any other kind of thinking. If you lay in bed and start ruminating about an argument you've had, you will be stimulating systems in your brain which are quite stressful, and they're linked to anger. If you lay in bed and you're ruminating about how bad you are, or you're a failure, or depressed, you will be stimulating areas of your brain that will flood your body with stress hormones. So the new brain is a great brain, but it also causes us all kinds of problems because it can create these loops. And this part of our brain can also play on our bodies like fingers on a keyboard. We also know that we have a whole range of built-in biases. We have biases to be self-focused rather than other-focused. And we have what we call kin biases. That is, we're interested in our own genetic relatives. So, for example, if you have a baby, and you go to the hospital, you have your baby, and they take your baby off to weigh your baby, and then they come back and they say, I'm terribly sorry, but all the name tags have fallen off the babies. So we're not quite sure which one's yours. But don't worry, you've had some wonderful babies, you know. Just come and choose one you like. It would cause great distress. We also are a very tribal species, and tribalism is the curse of humanity. Tribalism is the curse of humanity because tribalism makes us incredibly cruel. And unless we really begin to understand our minds and get familiar with the minds that evolution has given us, then we can end up with quite dangerous and cruel minds. We live in a world where some are like this and some are like that. Where some live like this and some live like that. We live in a world where we can do untold misery. In England, up until about 300 years ago, most cities had torture chambers. We used to have a thing called being hung, drawn, and quartered, which was a terrible way to die. But it attracted hundreds of people to watch these awful things. The fact of the matter is that there is a darkness in the humanity, but we can address that if we are honest and open about it. Tribal violence, of course, ends up like this, and we can use our intelligence for that. So we're at a point in our history where we're beginning to wake up with what is possible and capable within the human mind, beginning to take responsibility for the bad that we do. We also know that in terms of mental health, there are many areas of mental health which actually are increasing, particularly in younger cohorts, the levels of depression are rising. We know that just about 1 in 2 people will have some kind of mental health problem at some point in their life, and part of this is to do with the kinds of cultures and societies that we're living in. If we look at the World Health Organization data on the burden of disease, we find that heart disease is the greatest burden, but that's followed by depression. And if you look at the burden of disease for women in the world, the greatest burden is depression, by a long way. So mental health problems are a very serious epidemic. We have a very serious epidemic of mental health problems for people in the world today. And it's partly because of the way our minds are, and it's partly because of the societies that we've created. So what to do? Well, the first thing is to become mindful, to start to take control of our minds, to understand what our minds are up to. But many of us really just allow our minds to do their own thing. But you see, your mind is like a garden, right? Like a garden, it will grow. And it will grow according to whatever seeds happen to be blowing in the air, to whatever rainfall falls in your garden. And the weeds will grow and the flowers will grow. But you might not like the result. So a self and a mind is the same. It will grow. But if I was in a drug community, a violent drug gang, the mind will grow that way. Or if I was in a loving environment, it would grow that way. So minds will grow according to the context in which they are embedded. But we may not like the result unless we start to take control over the ways in which our minds actually grow and get cultivated. And one way of beginning to do that is to become much more aware of what our minds are up to, what they're capable of. Compassion is a motive. Compassion is a way in which we can organize the mind. If you organize your mind for compassion, then you're organizing the way in which you think, you're organizing the way in which you attend to your relationships with other people, and this is a very different way from being competitive. Western societies are very keen on competition. Our children are taught to compete. We're not allowed to sit on our laurels. Being content is a bad thing. Certainly when I was growing up, I was always told, don't sit on your laurels, Gilbert. You've got to do better, you've got to do better, you've got to have more, you've got to have more, you've got to do better, you've got to strive. In this world, it's all about competing, right? There are no place for losers. The problem with this psychology is it will organize people's minds. And we are now beginning to reap the whirlwind of that, I think. So the other key then is, if we're going to understand our minds, if we're actually going to look at the potential within humanity, what we are capable of. We are capable of some very dark things, but we're also capable of some wonderful things if we wake up and start to take control over how our minds are regulated and how they're cultivated, then I think we have a future. So let's just think about the mind in terms of emotion. Now, there are 3 types of emotion. There's emotion which is related to threat, so things like anger, anxiety, disgust. These are all emotions which have evolved to help you deal with things that are threatening to you. And the thing is that your threat system is your most dominant system. There is more of your brain dedicated to dealing with threat than anything else. So, for example, supposing it's Christmas and you go Christmas shopping and you go into 10 shops, and in 9 of the shops, the people are really helpful to you. The assistant goes out of their ways to find you the present you want, and you come out of the shop and you're really happy about that. But in one shop you go into, the assistant is very rude. They're talking to a friend. They say, just a minute. Wait a minute. You want to talk to my friend here? I've got a party you're going to tonight, all right? They shortchange you, and you come out of the shop pretty annoyed. So who do you think about when you go home? Who do you talk to your partner about? Who are you going to write to the manager about? Okay? 90% of the people, 9 out of 10 people were kind and helpful to you. How much time do you actually give to thinking about them? How much time do you actually put them in your memory and remember the smiles and remember the helpfulness? We don't do it. It's not our fault. It's the way it is. Your brain will take control, and your threat system will take control if you let it. But once you wake up and you begin to understand what mischief your brain gets up to, you may decide, actually, no, I don't want to go there. I want to focus on the good. I want to focus on the good in other people, and I want to focus on the good in me, and that's what I'm going to cultivate. And so this is a key issue. It's also the same with our inner minds. We can focus on all the things we don't like about ourselves, all our failures, just like the 10 shoppers. And we lose sight of the good in us. And when we do that, then we are, of course, heading for mental health problems and depression. There is another emotion system, which we call a drive system, which is the system to give us excitement. The activating system, and this is the system which gives you excitement and drives and going on holiday, winning the lottery and that sort of thing. And this too, if it's highly activated, will take you over. So imagine then that you win I don't know what your lotteries are worth, but in Europe we have a lottery that can get up to 100 million euros. It's a lot of money, I agree. So just imagine then that you win the European lottery, and you're worth $100 million in this case. What will happen in your body will be quite astounding. You'll have a rush of adrenaline and dopamine. You won't be able to sleep. Okay? You'll try and do your meditation. Oh my God! So when something really good happens to us, our minds are taken over. We lose control of our minds to the excitement. And what we know is that for some people, bankers for example, they get hooked on excitement. They're always wanting to do the next deal, the next deal, the next deal, because the buzz of the excitement drives them on. Now, excitement is also important in relationships, because we get a lot of joy from our relationships. And the fact of the matter is, if somebody offered you $100 million and then said to you, yes, but you can't live in Australia anymore, you have to say goodbye to your family and start all over again somewhere else in the world, you'd probably say, well, that's not, it's not worth it. And so the point is, we recognize that even in the context of having loads of money, actually what really matters to us is relationships. Humans love to do things together. We are a species that excels at doing things together much more than any other animals. You'll never see 2 chimpanzees picking up a log and walking with the log, for example. Something as simple as that. But humans can. We are a fantastically cooperative species. And we love doing things to help others. And in fact, this begins very early in life. I'm going to show you a video, because I think it's a rather lovely video, just to show you how much humans do enjoy doing things for others. Oh. Oh. So. Einmal hier und einmal. Oh. relationships help make the world safe. So although your threat system is very easily sparked, very easily activated, it's very easy to get you angry, very easy to make you anxious, very easy to make you tribal and prejudiced, it's also the case that relationships can actually calm down your sense of threat. So we are a species which grew up, which has evolved and grew up being cared and looked after by others. And this capacity to be soothed and cared for by the kindness of others is horrendously important for humans. From the day that you're born to the day that you die, the kindness of other people will have a huge impact on the quality of your life, because you're biologically designed to respond to kindness. So this green system, we call it the green system here, this is absolutely crucial to that. So the fact of the matter is then that you have a brain, we all have a brain, where threat is easily activated in us. We can become very threatened, we can easily become angry and aggressive, but actually kindness and affiliation will calm us down. There are particular hormones in our body where we can be calmed down by the experience of kindness, right? Now this is going to be really important when we come to do the exercises a little later on. This compassion is not airy-fairy, wiffly-waffly stuff. It is not fluffy stuff. Compassion is based on a very hard science understanding about how your brain actually regulates itself. And one of the reasons that people have mental health problems or become aggressive or get into drugs is because this affiliative system isn't working. Many will have come from backgrounds where they were abused or neglected. When the affiliative system works, 9 times out of 10, people will grow up and be okay. And so in therapy, what we're trying to do is often to help people get this green system going, this affiliative system going, helping them be open to the kindness of others and develop kindness for themselves, because that is what will calm down the threat system, because that's the way the brain is wired. So basically then, our new brains, this is our new brain area here, if we get that green system going, what we know is that when children grow up in loving and cared for environments, their levels of arousal are constantly being down-regulated. So the child is distressed and they go to mum, mum picks it up, gives it a cuddle, there. But for children who come from more difficult backgrounds, there's often no one to go to, or if they do go to that person, they're just as likely to be hit as to be soothed. But the soothing brain is the brain that gives us flexibility. We become much more aware, much more attentive, we're much more in control of our attention, we're able to reflect, we're able to develop empathy. Whereas if we have a brain which is overloaded, we call it sympathetic overload, but we're in a high state of stress all the time, okay, then that makes it very difficult for us to control our attention. So our minds become flighty. We're always taken up with the next thing and the next thing. We have troubles in reflecting. We don't reflect very much. It's like we're on automatic pilot all the time. We never stop and think about what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our lives, and whether or not our minds are growing in the way that we want them to grow. We also know that one of the biggest blocks for the capacity for affiliation to regulate our experiences of threat is shame. Now, shame is a major issue, but many individuals carry this fear that if you really get to know them, you won't like them. That there is something bad about them, that if they get too close to other people will discover things about them, and then they won't be liked. So many of my patients will say, well, the thing is, they say, yes, I know you want to help me, but if you really knew what went on in my mind, you wouldn't like me. You would think I wasn't worth helping. And of course, the reason for that is because our minds can generate a whole lot of nasty stuff. Horrible fantasies, sexual, aggressive, and so forth. And people can be very frightened about that. But the fact of the matter is, it's not their fault. It's part of the way the brain is. And so what we help people to do is to begin to understand that, so that we can begin to reduce shame. If we reduce shame, we increase affiliation, increase the experience of kindness and connectedness, and then people start to feel better. Well, there are two psychologies to compassion, right? Compassion isn't about being soft or weak, okay? It's simply the sensitivity to the suffering of self and others, with a deep commitment to try to relieve and prevent it. Now, this is not my definition, but this is a relatively standard definition today. It's based in Buddhism, but it's not purely in Buddhism. You will also find it in Christian teachings as well. What it means is you have two psychologies: the ability to approach, to understand, and how to engage with suffering. Because quite often we turn away from it. We know that there are people suffering, but we actually don't want to think too much about it because we don't know what to do, we feel powerless or whatever it is. But when we engage with compassion, we actually start to take responsibility. No, I can't turn away from this, I've got to engage with it. And once you engage with it then, the question is, so what do we do? And this requires us to be skillful, because supposing you see somebody who's fallen into a fast-flowing river, right? And so your first psychology clicks in. Oh my God, I must save them. So you jump in after them. And halfway in the air you think, bugger, I can't swim. So that's not very skillful. Or sometimes people engage in being very helpful to others, and we're going to be doing this tomorrow, but then after a while become overwhelmed and start to drown in the misery of other people. Again, that isn't very helpful. So we need to recognize that suffering also requires us to think about and understand how to bring the end to suffering as well. Compassion is a relational process. In other words, there is always a giver and receiver, even when it comes to self-compassion. So the ability to give compassion, to be compassionate, depends on certain qualities of mind. For example, being empathic, understanding other people, recognizing other people's suffering, and knowing what to do. And there are things that will facilitate your capacity to be compassionate, but also inhibit it. For example, it's very easy to be compassionate to people you love, but not people you don't. Okay? To people you know than people you don't. To people who are like you than people who are not like you. So there is what we call easy and hard compassion. Okay? And the compassion that we need in the world is, of course, hard compassion. It's being compassionate in the areas of our lives that we find difficult. Equally, receiving compassion. Okay? There are some individuals who find it very difficult to receive compassion, to be open to compassion. They don't believe it, for example. Very often some of the people I work with say, yes, well, you seem very compassionate, Dr. Gilbert, but actually it's because you're paid to be compassionate. And you say to them, do you think I'd do this if I wasn't paid? So the idea here is that some people have the sense of deserve. They don't deserve compassion, or you can't trust it, or compassion is manipulative. You're being kind to me because you want something out of me. You're being kind to me because you want to make me change, and therefore it's good for you. So there are all kinds of inhibitors on compassion. When we work with compassion with violent males, for example, we don't go anywhere near the concept of kindness to begin with, because the moment you start talking about that, they think that's soft and wimpy. So you have to talk about compassionate courage with them. So part of what we do as therapy is trying to work with both the facilitators, but also the inhibitors. And so compassion then is flow. Okay? There's the compassion that you are open to from other people. How much do you actually spend noticing the helpfulness of others, the smiles of other people, whether it's just on the bus, in the street, in the shops, and how much do you focus on the things that really annoy you? Where is your attention? How much control over your attention do you actually have? Do you let your attention just go wherever it wants to go, or do you actually control it? There's the compassion that you feel for other people. We know, for example, that individuals who think about helping other individuals, they're often happier. In fact, one of the most meaningful things that people say in study after study is, what is meaningful in my life is helping other people. So on the one hand, the tragedy of humanity is that we can be the most terrible of species, the cruelest of species, yet on the other hand, the things that gives us most joy is helping other people. And that begins very early in life, as I showed you with the video. You saw the joyfulness in those young children when they were able to be helpful to the adult. And then, of course, there is self-compassion. the ability to treat oneself with understanding, kindness, and support. It is very easy in our society to become frustrated and angry with ourselves. The problem with doing that, though, is that you will be stimulating systems in your brain that, in the end, will make you feel bad. And so, as with the other forms of compassion, self-compassion, being compassionate to oneself, particularly in times of difficulty or suffering, turns out to be able to stimulate areas of your brain that will help you. Self-criticism often does not help you because it's associated with frustration, anger, and even contempt, whereas self-compassion will help you. And self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook, it's helping you find the courage to face and do what you need to do. So if you're an agoraphobic, for example, being compassionate to yourself doesn't mean sitting at home eating chocolates, watching TV, so that you don't have to face anxiety. Compassion is making the decision to get over your anxiety by going out, by facing the difficult stuff. So compassion is what takes us into difficult areas. Compassion is what takes us to those areas, those people that we don't like that much. And compassion is what takes us to the areas in our own mind that we don't like or that we are fighting with. The first thing I'm going to do is to talk about the importance of slowing the body down. One of the areas where compassion gets difficult is when we speed up. And in our society, we are constantly speeding up, whether it's all the television programs that you're seeing, which are all about excitement, excitement, excitement. If you talk to newspaper editors or TV makers, the thing you must never ever do is bore your audience. And so over the last 30, 40 years, we are living in a media-generated society where the most important thing they want to do is to excite you and get your attention. The problem with that is that they're constantly speeding you up, speeding up your mind, and therefore it's important to start the process of slowing it down. So what I'm going to go through now is some breathing exercises for you. And then we're going to do what we call compassionate self-focus. And then we're going to look at how we can use a compassionate self-focus to maybe deal with difficulties in our lives. Right, so when we speed up, our breath speeds up. When we slow down, our breaths slow down. So I'd like you to sit with your feet flat on the floor and backs straight in the chair as if there's a rod going straight through your back. So have your shoulders over your hips and your ears over your shoulders, everything nicely in line. And we're going to slow the breath on purpose. I'm going to count you into this, and the idea is to breathe down into your diaphragm, into this area, into your solar plexus area down here, but also allow the air to circulate around your chest. Okay, now if anybody finds this a bit difficult, don't worry. Just find your own rate of breathing. Only go with this exercise if you find it helpful. Don't push yourself into it or anything like that. So here we go then. In, 1, 2, and out, 1, 2, in, 1, 2, 3, and out, 1, 2, 3, and in, 1, 2, 3, 4, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, last time, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is the rhythm. You're aiming for about 5 or 6 breaths per minute, slower and deeper than you would normally. And I'm going to leave you with that breath for 1 minute. And feel yourself slowing down. Each time you breathe out, feel the sensation of your mind is slowing down. Okay, so just notice now how your body feels. Notice you feel maybe slightly heavier in the chair. You can feel the chair holding you up because your body has been allowed to just gently slow down. we're feeling a little bit more solid. So now, as you sit there, just focus on that feeling of solidness and groundedness, like a mountain, stable, solid, with your breathing at about 5 breaths per minute. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is to use our facial expressions, and the thing to do here is just pay attention to what happens, right? Just notice what happens when you do this exercise. So we're going to shift between neutral face, which is probably what you have now, and friendly face. Now, friendly face, you have a very gentle half smile. Okay, so imagine that you're with somebody that you really like, and that you have a friendly face. You're wanting to greet them in a friendly way. Okay, so we're going to do 15 seconds of neutral face, and then 15 seconds of friendly face. And just pay attention to the subtle differences in feeling you create in your body when you change facial expression. Okay, so we're going to start off with neutral face. So neutral face. And now create friendly face. Okay, neutral face. And now create friendly face. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with voice now. So we're going to say hello to ourselves in a neutral voice and in a friendly voice. Okay, so on the out breath you'll be saying hello and then name yourself. So in my case it will be Paul, so it'll be hello Paul, and using a neutral voice and then a friendly voice, because you want to see the differences of the effect of changing your inner voice tone. And you're going to combine that with your facial expression. So when I say neutral, you'll say hello to yourself in a neutral voice with a neutral facial expression. And when I say friendly, switch that to friendly facial expression and voice tone. Okay, so start with neutral. Now friendly. And neutral. And friendly. So just hold that now for a moment. Keep your breath at about 5 breaths per minute if you can. If you're doing faster, it doesn't matter. Just find your own rhythm. And now we're going to do what we call compassionate self. Now, this actually uses what we call as method acting techniques, but you don't need to worry about that. What we're going to do is to just imagine that we are the most compassionate person we can be, right? It doesn't matter whether you think you are compassionate or not. We're just going to imagine that we are, as if we're an actor getting into a role. Okay? Just like an actor can act angry or act anxious, we're going to imagine being a compassionate being. And to be this compassionate being, the first quality you have is your wisdom. And the wisdom is that you know that we've all just found ourselves here. We haven't chosen the brains that we have, or the life that have made us what we are, or designed our versions. You have the wisdom that all of us are on this life for a short time, and we are all vulnerable to suffering. We are all the same. This is your first wisdom. So just spend a moment realizing you know this. You have this wisdom right now. You are already a wise being. And the second quality you have is great strength and fortitude. So as you're sitting in the chair, feeling your body becoming grounded and heavier, just feel that solidity in it. That sense of authority as you sit still and straight. And this is a self that has commitment. You're going to commit yourself, given that we live in a world of suffering, to do the best we can to be supportive, helpful, understanding, and kind of others whenever we can be that. And think of how wonderful that would be. Think of the joy that would be. Think of the pleasure we get from seeing others benefit from our helpfulness. And as you focus on these qualities of wisdom, strength, and commitment, just stand back and imagine seeing yourself walking about in the world. See yourself walking about, interacting with other people. Look at the expression on your face. Look at the way you talk to people, how you think about people, how you're orientated to them. Just watch your compassionate self moving about in the world. So you can practice this when you go home or at any time of the day. In our work we say 2 minutes under the duvet, which means that before you get up in the morning you can just cue in to the kind of person you want to become. It's like if you want to be a golfer or a cricketer or a piano player, you practice, right? So what we know is that when people tune in to the self they want to become, they just slow down for a little bit and think about, what kind of self do I want to train? What do I want to cultivate in myself? If I practice this, then these qualities will gradually come for you. If you let angry mind or anxious mind or rushing around mind dominate you, it will. It's no law against it. But you might not like it. Whereas if you begin to cultivate the calmer mind, compassionate mind, this may help you. So we're going to do a little bit of focusing now, and then we'll finish for the evening. So the first focusing then is to bring to mind a person that you love. See them in your mind, and as you breathe out, on the out breath, you can have 2 mantras. May you find peace, and may you be happy. So as you breathe out, and you can name that person. So if I was focusing on my friend James here, I would focus on may you find peace, James, may you be happy. Or if I was focusing on my wife or my daughter, I would name them. So whoever you bring to mind, name them. We'll just do that for 30 seconds and notice the feelings that arise when you really wish this for somebody. Notice the joyfulness. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this could be true? Wouldn't it be wonderful if a person that you like or a person that you love could be happy? Okay, so now we're going to imagine the compassionate wish for the self. So let the person you've been focusing on fade and bring a picture of yourself to mind. And once again, you can name yourself on the out breath, or you can think I. So you can be, may I find peace, may I be happy, or may you find peace, Paul. Now different people find this, they have different experiences with different, so you'll have to practice this, which one is more powerful for you. So for 1 minute now, just focusing on yourself, okay, this real wish for you to find peace and for you to be happy, and how wonderful that would be. And if you notice any resistance to that, don't worry, because we're going to deal with that in a moment. Just focus for 1 minute now, really wishing this for you. Okay, and now if there's any resistance, if there's a part of you that thinks, yes, that you don't deserve it, or you're not very compassionate, or if people really knew about you, they wouldn't be compassionate, all of that stuff that goes on in so many of us, just hold that compassionately. And now we wish that which resists compassion in me, may that find peace. That which resists compassion in me, may that find peace. Okay, and the last focus for the night is bring to mind something that you're struggling with at the moment. Nothing too major, because obviously this is a talk, it's not therapy, but something that's maybe a little difficult. And just look at it through the eyes of your compassionate self. And think about, if your compassionate self could help you cope with this, how would it help you? Just feel in the presence of your compassionate self as you look at this difficulty. And see what happens to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is a compassionate self inside of you. Your angry self, your anxious self, your rushing around self, those selves will turn up. You don't have to lay in bed and think, oh, I've got to practice being more anxious, you know. I don't have enough panics in my life. So they'll turn up, they're automatic. But compassion self you have to cultivate. So whenever you're struggling, take a breath, slow down, deliberately slow down. Remember your wisdom, that you didn't choose any of this stuff, right? You didn't choose to have all the difficulties that you're having. But with compassion, you can learn how to face them. It will help you face them. And always, to the best of your ability, create kind voice in your head. Because if you get depressed or you get anxious, angry voice will turn up. Contemptuous voice will turn up. And you can listen to it if you want. There's no law against it. But if you deliberately practice generating kind voice, that you will find that this will soften down some of your difficulties. So it's learning to put your compassionate self at the center of your being as a goal in life. As you go through life, this is the self you want to cultivate, because this is the self that has wisdom. This is the self that has strength. This is the self that will carry you through. This is the self that will have the kindness that you need to calm down your threat system. So you put the compassionate self at the center of our minds. This compassion is not about getting rid of the difficult contents of the mind. It's not trying to get rid of it, drag it away, get it out of the way. It's recognizing that in our minds there are some pretty scary things. It's not your fault. They're in all of us. And if we've had certain kinds of life backgrounds, or we have certain kinds of genes, they can be quite intense. But it's not your fault. But if you approach them with compassion, you will be able to cope with them. So compassion is about becoming mindful. And there is a story, I'm not personally that religious, but there is a story that you will know well, which is the idea that compassion is coming down into suffering. Christ came down into suffering. Compassion is finding the strength and the courage and the commitment to face the suffering that's all around us, in our own minds and in the lives of other people. Compassion isn't about having this sort of pleasant face and you walk around like this. Compassion is hard, it takes courage, it takes effort, it's commitment, but it offers to have huge payoffs. Thank you very much.